he who thinks he can kill, and he who thinks he can be killed, both mistaken. I am time grown old. I am the trickster's hoax. No weapon can pierce the life that isn't you. No fire can burn it.
In the West, we study the great works of the distant past as a chore more often than we are entertained by them. Homer, Shakespeare seem rarefied, intellectual, elitist. The past is not alive for most of us. We've lost our connection to it, and we feel estranged even in the world of our grandfathers. It is a price we pay for progress, which is essentially the belief in a golden age that lies ahead. At the cutting edge, computers, medicine, the sciences, the past is an embarrassment. We're ashamed of our ignorance, our foolish superstitions. It is the same everywhere, we assume, or it soon will be.
Paul William Roberts, traveller, proliferous author. His best-selling book in India, Empire of the Soul.
During the 19th century, our imperialism was very different from the form it takes today, where multinational corporations and banks work invisibly, and Hollywood does the rest. It's hands-off, though hardly less benign than the old way.
By physically occupying the nations we were plundering, we were at least more direct and honest about our goals for the Third World, but we were also far more brutal. Because we were more visible, we were more vulnerable. But the generations coming afterwards and occupying, living in the lands their forefathers had conquered, at least came to understand, appreciate, and even love those cultures in which they lived. And nowhere was this more true than in India.
Young officers or civil servants arriving for the first time at their new home among the palm fronds and rice fields, or in the heat and dust of a desert cantonment, would commonly be told by some well-meaning old India hand that if they wished to grasp the essence of the place and its people, they should read one book, the Mahabharata, the world's oldest epic by far, and with 90,000 verses, exceeding the Bible and all of Shakespeare's plays bundled together, by far the world's greatest and longest epic poem.
Maha in Sanskrit means great. Bharata is mankind, because we think everyone originally came from India, or India. So Mahabharata is really the great India, or the story of the original man.
Great India, then, tells the story of two sets of cousins, the 5 sons of the dead king Pandu, the Pandavas, and the 100 sons of Pandu's brother, blind king Dhritarashtra, the Kauravas, who become bitter rivals and oppose each other in war for possession of the land. The Kauravas had a grotesque, demonic birth. The Pandavas were instead actually fathered by gods, and are assisted throughout the story by divinities and seers, including Vyasa, author of the poem.
What's your poem about?
It's about you.
Me?
Yes. It's the story of your race. How your ancestors were born, how they grew up, how a vast war arose. It's the poetical history of mankind. If you listen carefully, at the end, you'll be someone else.
Oh, I see. Duryodhana and all his brothers want to kill us.
They grow up together, but from early onwards, the Kauravas behave viciously towards the Pandavas.
As they get to be 18 or 20 years old, the rivalry becomes more and more intense, till it comes to fighting for who is going to win the hand of the beautiful princess Draupadi. And one of the brothers of the Pandava, Arjuna, wins her. But because their mother unknowingly says, share her between the 5 of you, Draupadi becomes the joint wife of all the 5 Pandava.
We will marry her. All 5 of us.
Yes. In India, we believe that the 5 Pandavas are the 5 senses. And we have a lovely story which says that if the 5 Pandavas are the 5 fingers, the palm is Draupadi, and that is how it becomes a strong fist. But without the palm, the 5 fingers would never be united. In each husband, one sees one quality. The eldest is Yudhishthira. He is the one who is born of righteousness and knowledge. The next is Bhima, the son of the god of wind, supposed to be the strongest in the world. The next is Arjuna, and he's the perfect warrior. The next 2 are twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, the highest forms of knowledge and wisdom. Each one is but a part of a totality. But when they are united, it becomes the complete human nature. And that is how really we think of the Pandava and Draupadi.
The Mahabharata is not just a poem about an epoch, but also from that epoch. Indian scholars date it thousands upon thousands of years before recorded history began, a notion scoffed at by Western academics, who are reluctant to go much further back than 1000 BC, which would conveniently not make the epic older than Homer and Iliad and Odyssey.
Either way, what makes it unique in world literature is that, unlike, say, the Iliad or the Odyssey, it is still enjoyed today by hundreds of millions of people from all walks of life, many of them totally illiterate.
Some will read it, others will see some kind of stage adaptation with songs and traditional dancing, others get to know it from cartoons. Yet by far the largest audience of all watched a recent television series of the story. The whole of India would come to a standstill every Friday evening, and the weekly episode was discussed the next day as keenly as any primetime soap opera.
If we today feel estranged, even from the world of our grandfathers, disconnected from our past, a Hindu from 2000 BC would find much about life in India today perfectly recognizable.
We are brought up with the Mahabharata as our popular heroes and heroines, as popular music, as our bedtime stories, as our parables on morality, on values. The greatest success story of any comic strip is something which is based entirely on the Mahabharata and Ramayana. It's difficult to understand this in the Western context where religion is something you go to church to practice. For us, it's not like that. Children in school, for example, if there is one child who is very strong or very fat, they'll say he's exactly like Bhima. And that is the kind of total livability and contemporariness of the Mahabharata today.
But a Bhima, played by an actor from Africa?
When we went to India, we saw very, very clearly nothing would be worse than to copy and do a phony reproduction done by non-Indians of the way Indians would stage.
So director Peter Brooks staged the Mahabharata with actors from around the world, making the epic accessible to audiences everywhere.
In all my conversations with Peter, I have often asked him why he works with an international group. And one of the things he has said is that if in such a small group of mixed races and colors and countries, we can create something that is harmonious, then the world has a chance. The Mahabharata cuts across everything. It cuts across time, color, across race, across language. it's the same issues that have continued to face human beings over millennia.
For your wives.
But I want to be discontented, dissatisfied.
The malice of the Kaurava cousins and their leader Duryodhana comes to a head when they take advantage of the eldest Pandava, Yudhishthira, who now rules the land.
Now, Yudhishthira is otherwise a very virtuous man, but his one weakness is gambling. And he comes knowing that the game will probably be rigged. And over days and days of playing,
I have won.
Loses one after another every single possession.
I have won.
Till he finally comes down to owning nothing but himself and his family.
I have won. My cows, my bulls, my goats. I have won. My forest.
He cannot stop. It is like something has possessed him.
All that I possess.
Bhishma!
And one by one, he plays and loses each brother. And finally, he loses himself and says, I don't have anything else. And Duryodhana, who has wanted Draupadi from the beginning, says, but you can play Draupadi. They once again play, lose once again, and are exiled into the forest for 12 years, somewhere where they cannot be found.
The Pandavas fulfill their part of that bargain, but their opponent Duryodhana is unwilling to restore them a small part of the kingdom even when their exile has expired, and even when their friend, the god Krishna, pleads on their behalf.
Yudhishthira, who does not want to wage war, sends Krishna to the Kauravas saying, I don't want my kingdom. I will take 5 cities or 5 villages or even 5 houses, and I will avoid war. And Duryodhana says, I will not
give 5 villages. I will not give 1 village. I will not give the point of a needle of earth.
Let one thing be certain. You will have your glorious death. If the earth is clamoring for victims, we will see a splendid massacre.
The Mahabharata is the story of a war, a pivotal war at a pivotal time. The most ancient of Indian texts, the Holy Vedas, posit vast cycles of astronomical time called yugas, which determine the very character of an age.
To simplify, these cycles are 4 in number, 28,000 years long, declining in virtue until a state of corruption when the world is destroyed, only to be created over again and again and again and again. The last age, Kali Yuga, is the one in which we now live, when things are at their most degenerate, people at their most wicked. But it began, according to the Vedas, 14,000 years ago, when that great battle of Kurukshetra was fought, the battle around which the Mahabharata revolves.
Was there ever such an era or such a battle? If there was one, when was it? And how preposterous are Brahmin students who place it way before recorded history began?
It's customary to view ancient Egypt as the world's longest continuous civilization. It's a view we inherited from the Greeks and Romans, who really knew little beyond the world of the Mediterranean.
The first to see it was Alexander the Great, and something he encountered there dissuaded him from adding India to his empire. Instead, he turned his vast army around and returned west, by all accounts a changed man.
But our ignorance of the vast age of India's civilization was due even more to a tendency to view Europe, our world, as the heart of life on Earth, an expedient that was self-serving during the heady days of empire.
We still think that all other civilizations were of minor quality. And this is perhaps why we still have difficulties in accepting that in the Indian subcontinent something developed which was even more important than all the early civilizations.
Janssen is one of the very few Western scientists drawn to an area which, when fully explored, will force history to be rewritten. Found only by chance in the early 1920s by British scholars looking for traces of Alexander the Great. But those were years of spectacular discoveries elsewhere. In Egypt, Tutankhamun's tomb was found, and by comparison what was dug up in India seemed crude and uninteresting, so hardly anyone took notice.
Because it was not sensational enough. The Indus Valley did not bring discoveries like big gold treasuries. So,
is it sensational?
Yes, it is very much so. The Northwest Indian area was an area which was very early already inhabited. Here we have now trades which go back to the 8th millennium, and it has a very, very long tradition, which we only know since 10 years, and it should be much more publicized and should get much more public awareness.
Towns in hundreds, arising 7, even 8,000 years before Christ, millennia before Egypt and Mesopotamia, with which we begin our history. Long before the first pharaoh united Egypt, a vast civilization centered on a twin river system in the Indus Valley, the Indus itself and the great river Saraswati, now vanished. One of the centers was Mohenjo-Daro, now found to be the largest archaeological site in the world.
Mohenjo-Daro could have easily covered 70,000-80,000 inhabitants. The spread is for more than 1 million square kilometers in the northwest Indian parts. This makes it the largest civilization in the 3rd millennium. It's bigger than Mesopotamia and even Egypt.
We are now just beginning to get a glimpse of how extraordinary this civilization was. 3-story dwellings with running water, cold and hot, as well as a sewage system and elaborate, wide roads. A model of sophisticated urban planning. And scientists are stunned by another fact.
We don't have any traits of absolutistic rulership, neither by profane nor sacred power. For example, as we have in Egypt, where you have the pharaoh, who is God and earthly ruler in the same person. But instead of that, big cities for 40, 50, 60,000 people constructed of the brick as we use it nowadays, proportion 1 to 2 to 4, they didn't use any other material. So it's a very modern engineering, architectural thinking behind which is stunning us nowadays. We cannot identify temples or palaces. The political the structure must have been very much dominated by the burghers themselves. If we identify civilization as rulership by the people themselves, it definitely was the cradle of civilization, definitely.
In closing years of British Empire, evidence turned up that seemed to prove that this unique, unknown civilization in India had abruptly ended sometime around 1500 BC. The discovery of dozens of skeletons heaped together led this man, Sir Mortimer Wheeler, to believe a massacre had terminated the city of Mohenjo-Daro and that the entire Indus civilization had met a sudden, violent end at the end of an invading superior race, the Aryans.
Wheeler was a British general sent out to head up the Indian Archaeological Organization. Perhaps it was this military imperial background that led him to conclude the Aryans, white-skinned people coming from the west with chariots on horseback, they were the ones who destroyed Mohenjo-Daro so completely it left nothing, in his words, but its name.
Wheeler's conclusions fitted in a frame of mind which attributed superiority to the colonizer over an inferior race. Since then, Whole generations of historians believe that these Indo-Aryans conquered and destroyed the Indus civilization, drove weaker, darker races deeper into India, started civilization anew, and are therefore authors of the Holy Vedas and the Mahabharata. But that theory is now crumbling fast in the face of new discoveries.
First of all, they've discovered that the greatest river of the Vedic times, namely Saraswati, dried up in about 2000 BC. And since the Aryan invasion theories suggested that these warriors, namely the Aryans, came to India about 1500 BC, how could they praise a river as being the greatest of the whole region if that river had already dried up 500 years before this entry into this region?
Neither did the skeletons of Mohenjo-Daro provide any evidence.
Had it been a case of massacre and subsequent occupation of the site by an alien people, you would have got these skeletal remains in the upper levels of the site, because thereafter it would be abundant. And then you would have also simultaneously got the evidence of that alien culture, namely those of the destroyer. Now, there is no archaeological evidence whatsoever.
Not shock of invasion, but climate change cut short the cities of the Indus Valley. The great Sarasvati dried up. Desertification drove people deeper into India. Only centuries later, Aryan groups rode in, gradually blending in with the population. Mohenjo-Daro was deserted after floods. These sand dunes is where once the great Sarasvati river ran. India's epicenter shifted east to the mighty Ganges River.
The quintessence of India, her religion, has remained unchanged ever since the great poem was composed. No invader or colonizer was ever able to overcome it. Indeed, many, like the Aryan invaders from the north, were overcome by it, absorbed into its generous complexities.
Jews were here since the time of King Solomon. India has the distinction of being the only country on earth where they were never persecuted. Almost every religious faith in the world is represented, often like Islam, in huge numbers. Christians number in millions. And out of Hinduism have come reformist movements like Buddhism that became major religions in their own right. But the Indian soul was never conquered. Vedas and Mahabharata spring from an ancient and enduring civilization, the scope of which we're only now beginning to fathom.
Take this seal. It was found at Mohenjo-Daro and dates from long before the Aryan invaders destroyed the Indus Valley civilization. Shows a figure seated in the classic lotus posture of meditation. A simple but conclusive proof of the extreme antiquity of India's enduring quest for spirituality.
Increasingly, we begin to push all ancient chronologies further and further back in the face of new discoveries. There is increasingly less reason not to believe the traditional chronology which places the Mahabharata much deeper into a distant past, and is after all the date given by those whose culture it actually is. A war from times much more distant than the war for Troy, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. The war between the Pandavas and Kauravas may seem a simple theme, but what makes it fascinating is that the many individual agendas, personal conflicts, and ethical puzzles are like one family tearing itself up, or one man rending himself apart. And above all, the epic formulates the basis of India's religious philosophy and thought.
at about the same time that the Mahabharata's nut was being created, Hinduism was developing in a philosophical fashion. So somewhere along the way, the story and the religion and the philosophy and the moral history all got wrapped into one story.
The root of Hinduism is not in the belief in just one God, like monotheism of Christians and Muslims, but that there is nothing in existence besides this one God.
God is not only in everything and everyone, he literally is everything. For, asks the Mahabharata, is the drop of rain, in essence, any different from the vast ocean into which it falls and vanishes?
If God is all, he is in us, and we are he. Man's quest, therefore, is for the divine within, to become part of all, part of God.
At its core, it's more a philosophy than anything we in the West would call a religion. But it was out of this philosophy, too austere, intellectually taxing for most, that was born the bewildering diversity of Hinduism's estimated 36 million gods and goddesses.
They were formulated as a means designed for those less sophisticated, in the same way as Christian mythmakers felt compelled to place Jesus next to the one God, shape Mary into the mother goddess, and create innumerable saints besides. Indian mythology is like a mirror that shows their heart's desire to all who look into it.
So the Hindu in his shrine might greet you with, "So you're a follower of this Jesus. You brought his image with you. He's very nice too. Put him up there in the shrine. There's plenty of room." It is so, because the original idea was never abandoned. It was merely enlarged, expanded upon for every imaginable taste. To this day, though, in his heart, the Hindu only really believes in one ineffable God, creator of everything, including you, to whom everything returns.
Not a Christian father high up in heaven, but inside us, everywhere, in all. Sometimes this one is known as Param Atman, whereas the individual soul is Atman. Para means supreme, the supreme soul. Our mind, our senses separate us from that soul. Our desires with which we shape the world around us distance us from the divine.
Desire triggers the actions that shape reality. But desires can never be satisfied because they are illusory. Thus it is what's called Maya, the illusion, that is both the architect and the substance of this world.
But I want to be discontented, dissatisfied.
And thus Maya, desire, feeds the jealousy and hatred of the Kauravas.
Their palace is incomparable. It was built for them by Maya, the supreme architect, of illusions, where thoughts become real. Arjuna said to me,
"Look at the crystal walls."
and I saw them. Suddenly, I ran into an invisible wall. Arjuna laughed and said,
"It's Maya's masterpiece. You think of a wall, and the wall is there."
I go farther. Lima shouts.
"Watch out! There's a pool in front of you."
Pool. I don't see any pool, yet my feet are wet. I run, I open a door. There's no door. I crash into a wall. I hurt myself.
Our pursuit of what we desire, everything we do to chase after that illusion, causes the soul to be endlessly reborn, life after life, a great wheel set in motion towards an eternal succession of birth and death and rebirth without end.
For the Hindu, it is life, not death, that is sad. It's a view shared by many of the ancients, who sometimes viewed being doomed to eternal life as the ultimate curse, something we come to regard as the ultimate reward. But perhaps we're wrong.
The Hindu seeks another reality, the truth within, and to become one with the Supreme Soul, pure, unchanging Paramatman, who is all. On a simpler level, Paramatman becomes a trinity, in which the Supreme Soul becomes Brahma, who resembles God the Father. Another expression of the Supreme Soul is the second in the Trinity, Shiva, destroyer of worlds, who wipes the slate clean so that all can begin again. He reconciles the opposites of existence, life and death. So as Lord of the Dance, he dances out the awesome rhythms of creation and destruction. And a third expression of the Supreme Soul is Vishnu, creator and sustainer of worlds, incarnating on earth in various forms throughout the ages to assist us on our way. Tumini, Buddha was such an incarnation. And in the Mahabharata, the god Vishnu has come down as Krishna, charioteer and friend of the Pandavas as they faced battle and the horror of killing family and friends.
Arjuna is the commander-in-chief of the Pandavas' army, with Krishna as his charioteer. And they go in to begin the war, and suddenly Arjuna loses confidence in everything that he's about to do. And he falls at Krishna's feet and says, I cannot fight.
Krishna, my legs grow weak. My mouth is dry, my body trembles. My bow slips from my hand. Uncle, cousins, nephews, and Drona, my teacher, they are all there. I can't bring death to my own family.
And it is then that Krishna turns to him and tells him words that become the Bhagavad Gita, the song of Krishna.
The Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's advice to war leader Arjuna on the eve of battle, is not only the central part of the epic, it is the very core of Indian thought, and as sacred to Hindus as the New Testament is to Christians.
Krishna led Arjuna through the tangled forest of illusion, through all the fibers of his spirit. He showed him the deepest movements of his being, and his true battlefield, where you need neither warriors nor arrows, where each man must fight alone. He taught him how the world unfolds. He spoke for a long time, very long time, between the two armies preparing to destroy themselves.
The Bhagavad Gita is a précis of everything that is Hinduism, and basically tells Arjuna of what right action and right thought are.
Right action, called dharma, is the main motive of the Mahabharata.
Vyasa, why are you inventing this poem?
So as to engrave dharma in the hearts of men.
So what is Dharma? Dharma is the great original invention of Hindu thought.
Dharma is perhaps one of those totally untranslatable words from Sanskrit. And it's one of the words which has 100 meanings and none of them is really synonymous. But dharma is at the same time virtue, duty, the right path, the right action, that which is correct for a person at that given point of time.
What is Krishna doing?
He's telling Arjuna that victory and defeat are the same. He's urging him to act but not to reflect on the fruit of the act. He says to him, seek detachment. Fight without desire.
You say, forget desire, seek detachment. Yet you urge me to battle, to massacre. Your words are ambiguous. I am confused.
Krishna tells him, don't withdraw into solitude. Renunciation is not enough. You must act, yet action mustn't dominate you.
In the heart of action, you must remain free from all attachment. You must learn to see with the same eye a mound of earth and a heap of gold, a cow and a sage, a dog and the man who eats the dog. There's another intelligence beyond the mind.
Dharma transcends charity, doing good in this world. It's acting for the soul, irrespective of what this world demands.
Dharma belies the Western criticism of Hindu thought that it leaves precious little room for free will, just binds man upon a wheel of fate, a wheel of reincarnation, rebirth that goes round and round and round and round and round.
Dharma offers the escape from the fate of reincarnation. It is the path detached from this world of illusion to the quintessential truth which Hinduism seeks.
The Bhagavad Gita illustrates the infinite scope of the Vedas. That is to say, Veda is Nitya. It's been there forever. It is Ajam and Avyayam. That is, it never had a beginning and it doesn't decrease with time. And one who has imbibed the spirit of this tremendous eternity, what kind of death can come to him? Nor indeed, what kind of harm can such a person cause to others?
If someone from the West would be looking for the holiness of the Bhagavad Gita, where should he look?
Whenever you hear the whispering of a brook, there is the entrance to divinity.
From a Western point of view, it's impossible to understand that fate, destiny, and free will can coexist. Everything in the Western mind says, if there's fate, there isn't free will. If there's free will, there can't be such a thing as fate or destiny. And the Mahabharata cuts that away and puts one in front of something very, very different, which is that freedom exists in a quite different way, and that one sees that the great freedom for each character is either to become himself or not to become himself.
It is with this detachment that Arjuna can sound the horn, even for the horrors of the coming war. The Pandavas win eventually, but it is a victory which is to deeply trouble them.
Every rule is broken, every single value is destroyed. There is no difference left between the people who are good and the people who are evil. There's no difference left between who is the enemy and who is not.
No one can calm the sense of wrongfulness in the mind of Yudhishthira, now king. Ultimately, the Pandavas decide it's time for them to leave this world too, and they embark upon the great journey, walking into the cold north towards heaven. One by one, they fall into the abyss and perish. Until Yudhishthira is left alone with a dog that has followed him faithfully all the way.
Who has come as far as this? Who are you?
I am Yudhishthira. I am looking for the gate of paradise.
You have proved yourself to be the best of kings. Leave this dog and enter.
I can't leave this dog.
Why?
He's followed me ever since I left the city.
Paradise isn't open to dogs. Leave this dog.
Abandon a creature who loves me, who's alone and defenseless. I can't.
It is the right path.
Enter.
The dog is his father, the god Dharma, here to test his virtue. Another test awaits in heaven, where Yudhishthira finds his enemies, the Kaurava, who come to mock him. His brothers are in hell, where Yudhishthira then chooses to be as well.
I will stay here forever with my family.
But it is his last test, his final illusion.
You've known neither paradise nor hell. Here there is no happiness, no punishment, no family, no enemies. Rise in tranquility. Here words end like thought. This was your last illusion.
Which ends the Mahabharata. Of the many dimensions of the poem, there's also this one.
It really talks about you. Krishna is the mind, the chariot is the body, the horses are the senses, Arjuna is the individual soul. It's very much something that's relevant to the spiritual condition of each person at any time in their life.
So they died without children, all of them. But you told me this poem tells the story of your race. Am I born from a dead race?
Look at this woman. Krishna saved the life of this child because his blood is the blood of Arjuna, his friend. And centuries will go by. And you will come from this woman.
That one work can contain both so much wisdom and entertainment after several millennia is mind-boggling and without comparison. If Homer's Iliad also contained the New Testament and was as popular today as it had been 2,000 years ago, even this would not compare with the poem attributed to Vyasa. By comparison, Shakespeare himself seems like a lightweight, and indeed all literary fame pales.
We find it hard to believe that anything of such magnificence could be a legacy from a time before history began. But in the West, our scholars primarily have looked for the cradles of civilization closer to home. To us, India is a mere footnote to history.
We require hard evidence, documents, records. And unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, where nothing will decay, the Indian climate ensures that nothing, not even the hardest stone carvings, will survive much beyond 1 millennium.
But could we be wrong? Instead of a footnote, should India be one of the main chapters in our history books? For the incredible age of Indian civilization, new evidence arises from the one intact source of Indian records so far overlooked: the fact that the word may be mightier than rock.
Countless generations upon generations have passed down the poem for many ages before it was written down. the verses remembered with uncanny precision through intricate exercise. As these two stop in mid-phrase, the next two must carry it on, and so endlessly, for precise memorization. The words are sung on rhyme and rhythm.
Examples of these mnemonic devices, these memory learning devices, are everywhere. But built into the Sanskrit language of the Vedas themselves is a meter, a rhythm so precise that you know exactly if you've made a mistake or not.
Oral tradition, the poets themselves, may have carved a monument that withstands the ages better than rock. It is lost when it's written down, for it goes by the ear, by the rhythm of the heart. The sound silences the mind, it stills all thought. But as the book says, make one mistake. That's when the snake strikes, when the ear hears. Oral tradition needed no written records. And if it could be remembered faultlessly for 1,000 years, why not for thousands or more?
Within the Vedas and the Mahabharata, scholars have now found surprising corroboration for the extremely ancient date at which these texts were composed.
The evidence is found in how Vedas and Mahabharata make mention of the stars and the skies.
It so turns out that the ritual of the Vedic people expressed astronomical knowledge. Once you analyze this astronomical knowledge, you realize that there was a very vibrant and acute tradition of observation of the skies.
Throughout millennia, ancient India was keenly aware of an astronomical phenomenon called precession. Most of us now are not familiar with.
Precession's not so difficult to explain, however. You remember this, the spinning top. Imagine this is the Earth, spins on its axis, gives us the night and the day. But as it does, there's this counter-rotation, a wobble.
One wobble of the axis takes more than 26,000 years to go round. Standing on Earth, it makes the stars and constellations seem to travel through the skies. Appearing from behind the rising sun, they change in periods of little over 2,000 years. We know them as Pisces, Aries, Taurus.
The computer shows us the skies of the past.
With mention of positions of planets, constellations and conjunctions, scientists can now precisely calculate when they were described.
We have been able to establish that the astronomical references that exist in the Vedas, and there are a variety of these references talk about periods of time which go to the 2nd millennium BC, the 3rd millennium BC, 4th millennium BC, and even earlier.
Benares, to Hindus the most ancient city in the world, where on the banks of the holy Ganga river, the dead are cremated in the old way, and little lights are lit for the souls. If the Mahabharata has one message to deliver, it is that man should most concern himself with the quest for inner peace and real happiness, which do not lie here in this world.
It's through understanding this that one grasps the essence of Indian thought. The indifference to material possessions evinced by so many here and deemed almost a crime in the West stems from the knowledge that whatever one gains in this world is lost the moment the body burns to ash, melts and vanishes into air.
So why concern oneself too much with ephemeral things? It may be a recipe for poverty, yet it is also one for the kind of riches you can take with you.
It is there also where lies the greatness of the Mahabharata.
He showed him his true battlefield, where each man must fight alone. He must learn to see with the same eye a mound of earth and a heap of gold, a cow and a sage. There's another intelligence beyond the mind.
Spiritual science, it seems, the precise technique of self-realization and liberation, has been a part of Indian society from the very start. Just as those new soldiers and civil servants of empire were told, anyone who understands this understands everything about India, and those who fail to understand it will never understand anything about her.